Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Sarah Allen, and you are on A Little Bit of Magic. And on our show, we bring to life moments of positivity, light, and wisdom. And today I have someone very special that embodies all of this. I can't think of anyone better to exemplify this than our guest today. This is Geshe Lhundup Jinpa.
Yes.
And Geshe Lhundup, thank you so much. We're sitting here today at beautiful Deer Park in Oregon, Wisconsin. And thank you for being on my show.
Of course.
And Geshe La, I have to tell the audience how that we met. Oh, and I also want to introduce Katrina.
Hi.
She's our translator. And Katrina, how did you learn Tibetan?
In school.
Oh,
Let's just
really?
put it that way. Still learning.
Really?
Yeah.
That's just amazing.
Yeah.
There's very few people I've met in my life that are not native, that have learned Tibetan as you have. So thank you for helping today. So I just want to tell the audience how Geshe La, you and I met in the airport in December. I don't know what day exactly it was, but it was right after Christmas.
Yes, Christmas.
And you were going to Denver,
Yeah,
and I was flying back to Oregon. I had just been here in Wisconsin visiting my family, and we sat next to one another, and we became friends. And you told me so much about your life, and your life as a monk, and your life in Tibet, and India, and in Nepal, some of the places you've lived. And I'm so happy that we've remained friends.
Yes, I have. Me too.
And that I never thought that one day you would be on my YouTube channel with me today. So you have such a beautiful message to share with the world. And so thank you for that. I have a question. First of all, I think your origins are very interesting. You have lived a very fascinating life. You weren't always a monk, right? You were born in Tibet. Tell me a little bit about your life growing up.
그냥 중중인데 간데도 그냥 길로기.
나 다시 중중 가나 가서 그런 당고 중중 가나 룩스치 때 그래.
When I was little, I was a shepherd. I worked as a shepherd.
너 중이네. 너 주룩 바르면 룩스치 때 그래.
From 12 to 16.
근데 너 걔네 중에 바르 럽터터.
From 8 to 12, I went to school.
아니 다너 주룩네. 아니 다다버다 그러는 시대.
From 16 until now, I've remained as a monk.
저와체네 배가 별라 상근데 줘라 로주테레 되네 지금 그렇게 급주급들라 자가 소용 자가라 로니스테 숨스테 되네 로직 바이올테 되네 니도니스테 숨 진다시바 그때리 말텔레
He's going to get really specific on the dates for
Okay.
me. So, from 16 until now, he has been a monk, and he took ordination at 16 at Shangandan Chokor in Tibet, where he remained for 10 years, and then he moved to India and was in India for 23 years, followed by a year in Nepal, and then came here to Madison, Wisconsin on April 5th, 2023. So
Wow, fascinating. You were a shepherd. I grew up on a dairy farm with cows and other animals, and my parents still live on a farm here in Wisconsin, but I grew up in Minnesota. What animals did you have when you were a shepherd?
진짜 가래가래 요레스 기랑게 신가 가래다 거레스
먼저 신발라 대요레 루기요레 라요레
sheep and
파주요레
goats
랑고요레
and cows.
기요레 시비
Cats, dogs, cows, bulls. Yeah.
가시라 야요레
Some people had yak,
들다 가시라 조요레
and then some had zo, which is a mix between a
Oh,
cow and
yes.
a yak. So that's not a common.
Do you drink yak milk?
horse yes
Is it delicious?
Horse, delicious
I always wondered what it tasted like. Wow, you must like Wisconsin because you were in the middle of the farms. Do you like it here?
통이가 근데 시단다 Wisconsin 신가 아니 난 다오르베스
따도 자오시라요 뭐 줄롱보에는 사제 까부더로 사kambo 자오시라요 말에
So yeah, it's not exactly the same kind of climate though. I mean,
right.
they were farmers, but it was a very dry area.
Dry and
So,
mountainous,
yeah,
yes.
mountainous, dry, a little bit different.
이제
than
뭔가
here.
되게 컬러라도 타고
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
his areas, yeah.
More like Colorado? Yes, that's why you liked Colorado. You said you liked Colorado. It's like home.
Yeah.
How did you know? So you became a monk at 16. How did you know? Did you have a calling, or did you feel? What inspired you to become a monk?
rabdu 중앙이 김생 가르레스.
그래. 지당 rab도 중에티 된다 쏘다우디 가르스나 가스고 타르바토야게 시도래. 근데 타르바토야라 아니 소소 동바야고 송 된다 제고래. 동바야고 송알라 아니 동발랭고와 남아가 되네. 아니 동바 기수고 동바 개동고 동바고 디즈 디줄레네 아니 신에 따직 자와치에서나 아니 김바게 내가 상만치 딱 하나 제고 먹어 자라. 김바게 내가 제 먹어 자는데 소소 최세 되버려나 아니 소소 가서 제
중중에 최최이 되버려.
네, 나 라마송아 단다 동발리에 균제 카레스티로 땅아 치유에는 야
계란게 콜라.
알레 땅아 동발리에 땅 오랑 제주로 아 동발 네 다wen데 디두기 아니 주주들 빼고 싶어랬다. 교보 임베인데 디즈 고향신 개미원에 디즈 고향신 출시에 뒤주 디스요. 근데 뒤주질 아니야. 다와테 속에 다제지 아니 미정나나 출시에 근데 제요. 디중 아주 당보 통화로 왔다. 그래서 배 기부 통고요. 근데 기부 줘 통했는데 아니 신에 다와잖아요. 또 선어다가 더가 되nerles어.
다와도 얘기 되버
되게 하고 말하고
Okay, so when I first asked the question, he took it as more like a general thing, like, well, why do you take vows? What's the point in doing that? And from the Buddhist perspective, it's to attain liberation, because when you're a householder, you have all of these responsibilities that keep you from doing kind of spiritual practice. So that's the more like general reason. And so I asked, well, did you at 16, was that what you were thinking? And really, it was more practical in the sense that at that time, living conditions were really poor in Tibet. People were really poor. They didn't have a lot. And you'd see monks, and it seemed like they had a pretty good life. Like things were starting to get a little bit lighter under the Chinese control. They were allowing people to do some kind of, at least semblance of religious practice again. And so it was that kind of desire of like, that looks like a happy life, like that these monks have when the life that you were born and brought up in was pretty, lacking, you could say.
Wow.
Yeah.
What do you enjoy most about being a monk? What gives you the greatest joy or reward?
Ta rabdu jumne ta hundreds lagre lens and amidu ta dute so karres kirang ta gawo yoyan so karres
땅마 되네 진짜 rab도 중앙 제로 다 rab도 진짜 중앙 제네 신에 따직 rab도 중에게 규다고 때문에 따직 근데 이마치 섬을 땅 거야 되게 신에 하고 따로 또 소수 기부 용에 다 되게 제도 많이 봐. 소온 귤라 카르고서 니중 세. 타르바토베 제도 니중 고도. 니중이 야고 깨어를 쳐봐라. 아니 동바테도 숨겨 와서 진행해 하고 다 동바테도 숨겨. 어디 신에 하고. 근데 다시기 라마테서 그때는 nga 지니 ngarange pejalo tenesian 되면 다지기 근제배하고 또 상대데 고도체로 치르친. 네 디네 다지 자와치 거에 듣고 배심부터 선배 다디네 셈 기부를 배차다 갈래 든데스터.
Many things on the shatin naya yenare sumje naya yenare da
배기부터
기보 영향
나랑 기부다 등산
so karre da yakshar karre
당 하게 봐내 장애디 단 남배 최초서는 내 장애디 쪼디 나랑 체도를 민도다 나랑랑 체도 체면도 쪼디 장산에게 소소하게 냠내 야고 전에 네 냠내 제교디 밀라바 고도제 파시다 이게 삼조대 졸네 소소하게 고도대 파트 네 삼바지리랍체 then control pen도 치고 마신 뭐 망보적으로 하다. 그래서야 pen도 치고 백해치 뭐래. 최근 나는 시나 펜톱 거와 개치시 접시를 당랑 값을 툭툭 시나 펜도를 시나 생각도 같아.
Sorry, it's sometimes hard to get like a question into a small sort of thing. And so Geshe La, after having taken the vows for some time, really began to understand like the purpose being that it's not like for happiness in this life that they take vows or really to please someone else even, but it's for the sake of renunciation, because by renouncing the world, you're able to then engage in a spiritual practice that again is not about yourself, it's really about other people. And so it was sometime after taking those vows that really that sort of meaning, that understanding was like deeply felt. And I would say that now, as far as what makes him happiest is like anything that benefits other people. I mean, the whole thing in doing this kind of a life, all of the study and training that goes into it is to be able to help people. Like it's for the purpose of others. And so whether that is giving someone knowledge that they didn't have, giving them some kind of advice that is useful, but like fulfilling their needs in those various ways, that would be like what makes him happiest, most happy. I'd say like
That's wonderful.
the greatest joy is just like living that.
Yeah. And that kind of brings me to my next question. You know, I see that there's so much suffering in the world, right? People are suffering. I'm a healthcare practitioner, and I see people, they have anxiety and depression. They're lonely. They feel disconnected. It's higher than it's ever been, I think, in the world. And do you have a message or a belief or a practice to help people in the modern day world that are not living a monastic lifestyle, how they can get through their suffering and how they can find better happiness and joy in life?
다 지다 잠불링이랑 다미 동양 망루 그래. 믹스에디 셈기 강에 된서 제루 그러와. 달로 파미야 이나레 라다가스타 남랑기야 이나레 스타미 셈기 서유기 동양 셈기 동양 다 제루 도게 예베 갑수다 그랑기 랍자 가르레스 디 랍투 마주나야 디 미자 이나 난 간데스 다 탑시 디 네바서 얘기 탑시 약시 가르레스
그래다 당한 저게 낭배숑에 세베나 따직 당벽의 투수 당복가와 당벽의 투수대 디네 단다 말마 따직 도루래서 아니 따직 님마세야 되라 아니 지초진의 투수 님마세로 초진의 녀몬성 님마세로 초진의 다심진 님마세로 단 녀몬대 도루다 라로라고 채용되게 녀몽 규례 템베게 좋아해서야 저바 도루 뭐다 대도 대 도루에 견제체는 땅하나 동아한테 뭔가 쉬운 거다. 이모인도 다 투수님만 된대지 동아가 끼라야 아니 소소된데 초고와인데 강하다 뭔가 용거서 강배 뭔가 이나야 강하들라 동네 식당 면다고 담만다 요초로와.
So we're going to take a break in the question and make sure that we can get all of it. But here, according to the Buddhist texts, I mean, there's sort of a cosmology that involves there being an initial eon, and then we move through a kind of time cycle that involves what we could call the degenerate times. Like, and it's not sort of that's the end. I just want to add that in as the translator, but there's a cyclical nature. But in this kind of time where we see the degenerations in terms of sentient beings having more afflictive emotions, and like beings who have more afflictions within their mind streams are going to suffer more. They create more suffering for themselves and suffering for others as well. So we can acknowledge that we're in a time period where there is that kind of decline or degeneration in terms of the time of being, the kinds of beings, the sort of afflictions that they have in their mind. And so first we have to acknowledge that we're in that kind of suffering situation, and there are multiple methods to be able to sort of challenge those, take those on, and we'll then turn to the
이제 다시 동아들라 바세고라 동네 지당들라 아니 당부 때 따지 동아디 용해디 랑래 현진에 참 용기도 삼도 땅 임베나 랑당 저와 미교지 랑래 현진에 참마된데 용기도 삼도 땅에나 아니 백강 침부 소르디 디기 동아디 참마 현내 용기도 삼 땅에나 배 디기 땅 동아 치로 땅 도도에지 용어다 디 삼도 땅에 말 동아디 용해디 아니 초직 말랑 맞고 삼땅 로 소수의 초직 아니 되게 규당 kiến직 아니 말랑 전에 사내게 규당 kiến 되게 되부지 말랑 미용래 말랑 재미 말에 말랑 토네게 네 디교사베 되부지 말라 동아도 중어래 규미 때문에 전에 이 말에 동아 용해들 교요래 교요바티 정말 신기 말에 자외 또 동아 용해 교디 네 사샤 말랑게 사역 대부 주디 대부디 말하는 민도 삼삼다나 가로직 충으로.
So one of the first kind of methods that we can use is often when we're suffering, we think that our suffering is coming entirely from the other, like it's others doing this to us, or somehow our suffering has this source, and really we should just blame others for that. But according to Buddhism, you can't experience some kind of suffering without yourself having created the causes for that in the past. And so by acknowledging, in fact, that we are constantly creating the causes for our own suffering. I mean, partly by thinking about things in a sort of wrong or misguided way, but also in that we have to acknowledge we have created the sort of causes for this, that suffering is going to arise. And by shifting our focus from, oh, suffering is entirely coming from others and it's because of others and they're the cause of that, that can considerably lessen our suffering if we just sort of take some accountability for that or some recognition of that kind of situation.
네, 저지 근데 동아디 다지 강함은 무슨 연구로 와 강함은 버티 영야디 말랑 지불해 민두스 말랑 지불해 민두 말레 셴베게 니 직강아치 wak도 뭐 쉬어지도 근데 강아치 뭐 쉬어지냐샤 근데 용게 대줄 따나야 말랑 동아디 대략되어봐야나 강말레 체계다 소소래 강아치 뭐 쉬어져로 대줄 때나 소소강 개개를 해 민두 콘순인지 등아란데다 배동아 중중래 상도다 야디마 동아 중두.
And then one way is thinking about the fact that often when we're suffering, we think that we are the only one that suffers. Like that we get very focused on what we are experiencing without really recognizing the fact that there are many people, many beings out there suffering in all kinds of different ways and in ways that are much more intense and aggravating than our own suffering. To kind of put it in perspective that really when we look at all of the suffering that is out there, all of the potential kinds of suffering and those that beings are actually experiencing, ours really isn't that great. That everyone experiences suffering, and also to try to keep in perspective that whatever we are going through, there are other beings that definitely have greater sufferings.
당한도 로아 미타고질라 다 강아주 친구 쇼지 태운되기 초진에 다 강아들 동안 당리 제거로 와 태운되기 아니 다직 나사 임바이나레 다 소부 강아 임바이라나 소소라 지금 어떻게 변해서 망보지고 임면 딜라 로아 미지 임베 괜찮은 거죠 탑시 땅에 망보 쉬어줘라다 나자지 임바이나 뒤주답지 멤버때야도 메사야도 메하다 망보 쉬어지 좀 탑시 또 아니기 만도 뒤로 심지어도 지금 나야가 가도라 근데 되게 민도하다 그래서 니제지라 지금 답을내고는 연구도 마다 강아지 민도한테 고sol을 때나 말은 탑시 쉬어줬대야 또 예원인데 나 강아지다 탑시 때나 세게 탑시 주도 삼삼 지용적으로
So in one way, I mean, we experience sufferings and we have to be able to bear with them, to be able to like handle what comes at us and take that on without getting despondent about it. But also as humans, as opposed to other types of beings, we have so many methods to alleviate our suffering. Like imagine all of the animals out there when they have injuries or illnesses, they don't have any way to get medical treatment for what they're going through, and all the kinds of myriad sufferings that are out there. We as humans have so many methods, and so if there is a way to alleviate it, we can like apply those methods, and we have so many of them because of our intellect. So
다시 나서 많이 배나야 소소가 야지 내가 제당당 된대가 돌아지 강한 것이 트걸 와다. 아니 된대 연배인도 야 밀 깨져서 도왔다 하나로 같이로 지지지지서 밀레지 깨셔도 왔다. 된대 아주 탑시 센사에서 도와. 탑시 싸초 탑시 체조래 셈나 강아랑 군대에다 주면도 소소 탑시 체도 탑시 가져요나 탑시 제어로 체도 삼다.
So we really, we also need to like figure out the methods. How do we alleviate our suffering? Like we experience all of these different kinds of sufferings, right? But a lot of times we're adding on suffering in the way that we react to it. We're not finding like, well, how is the method? Do I need help from somebody? Like maybe I need an aid, maybe I need this. And finding the kind of method to go forward rather than getting caught up in just like, I'm suffering, but recognizing either I don't have a way to like actually fix this or I do, but then how do I do that? That's an important component.
나 되네 하다 저기 지금 동아다를 담만다 지금 연구로 왔다. 근데 동아디 답시 첸데 세요나 미베도 답시 가서요 그때 다 답시 첸데 그 강아도 세 켄에 매봐야나 샘자랑 강아랑 첸데와나 괴바민도스 되라. 이 샘자 첸에 괴바민도 소소면에 답시 가려야는 제발에 첸이다 두비에 민도 두비에 매를 돈도 샘자 지기 때서 소소소소 강한 수연이 촉하게 민도 삼리게 야, 이 샘라전의 편도여나 소소의 편도여나 샘라전 되게도 셀라 디스나전 셀라 편도여나 전되게도 편매와 라나 편매 셀라 편매도 아니 샘라전 좀민도 삼 괴바민도 삼
근데 점점 욕자 침보된서 양아 그저잖아 먼저 고유 유로져요. 나 먼저 달로 밤이래. 가연 제요 말에.
세상 어딘지 내가 없다 된데래. 그 지에매가 답시매가 내가 나 샘자 지기 때서 양교 편도요 말하다.
So here, just trying to give a little bit more context to the question in terms of, I mean, if we as humans have methods. So if there's a way for us to deal with whatever kind of difficulty, suffering that we're dealing with, whether it's something at work or some sort of trouble, like we need to evaluate, well, what's the method that I can do to fix this? And if there isn't a method, we're just worrying. That's not helping anything, right? It doesn't help us to stay in that kind of worry and confusion and like anxiety about something. It's not beneficial to ourselves or those that are around us or others. And so remaining in that state of worry isn't helpful in any way. And so I'm like, well, what about when it feels like these are really big problems, like something like climate change, where it's so overwhelming that like we don't feel we have agency. Really, we have to find where we do have agency. And then be able to let go of that just sense of worry, because again, we just comes back to having the mind in that kind of worried state isn't helping us, isn't helping anyone else.
대도 심식으로 비키는 마음보다 대당 데이터가 강화된데 마용 쇼 선면함지려면 겹. 또 대당들라 강화된데 마용 쇼 당하랑 면에 제답해면도 다 면남다는 되지. 면남시켜 비시네. 삼마야고 있다. 다 대와라. 강한 홍대교 좀 들어야 일단 지금 아침부터 되지사래 가슴 용대로에 삼내게는 인제 삼내게 인제 지금 저는 편도 시원으로 하대.
And sometimes there are those things that, they are so big and we don't have a method to be able to just apply to fix it. And in those situations, we should make kind of prayers. I mean, the word prayer can sound a little bit weird in English, but make those kinds of aspirations that may beings be freed from this suffering, or may there be a way out of this. To put forward those kinds of like positive thoughts and energy has a lot of power in and of itself. So when we see certain beings who have fallen into a kind of suffering that we can't get them out of, even to make that sort of aspiration, may they be freed from those sufferings, may they not have to experience that in the future. That is something like to generate that sort of compassion for others and a positive aspiration is in and of itself something that's really powerful. Okay.
미망부지가 레와 시워주로다. 미망부지가 레와 소소지가 레와 더바유교지가 레와 시부지 자네게 따지 내가 임바이나래 민이나래 따지 두비에게 채도 따지 내가 뭐 자대대로 다 제대로 와. 아디 되게 내가 손에 되디 못두부지네 강아시부 사냐지도 내 되디 사만행시 못두부 강아시부 사대니도 디 당번에 고람 삼았다 디생 지그랑 다 대에도 노래서 동안 전다 지랑 답이나 뽐뿌다시 여기 요에나 뿌뿌 다라라나라레 마라나 아치네 본 지금 미삼 삼세인데 따라봐 시오로와 미 다른 좀 따에나 변노 다 당번에 삼다운데 데블로를 삼다서 니숨 샤오로와 와 디토나 딩나 디레 가랑 디레 디 멋적이나 난가til라토 디야 멋든 난가til라토 삼베게 데블로라야 삼도통사 가시 샤샤요나 중만 전다도 멋주베나 꼭 강한 대상 요 말. 다 지그라 삼도통 대용도 디 멋주인도 디 강한 항상 오도 센데 노
So, sorry. You asked for advice for Geshe, you're really going to get. And
I'm getting the deep response.
yeah,
It's
so,
wonderful.
Another source of our problems is really having too big of expectations. Like we make these great hopes for something, we have these huge desires, and if we don't get them just as we want, then we get really disappointed. We feel like we, there's that sense of disappointment and loss. And so part of the problem is not having a flexibility of mind where we're so focused on like one thing, like we want to become the boss of this and like that's what we need to get and in order to be happy, in order to have what we want. And when we don't have any other path, any other way, then we're really going to experience suffering when we don't get that thing. So having like 2 or 3 backup plans, you can have hopes, you can have things that you want to accomplish, but also being realistic about if this doesn't work out, then there's another way, another route that I can go, instead of having this mind where we're so aimed, so focused on just one thing that then when we don't get that, it seems like we're inconsolable, and have that kind of inflexibility of mind. So
네, 다스 강아지 가르스나 마 shum되네. 심 shum되네. 미모질 강아도 와도. 또 니들 내가 소 가르스나 심생 되고 와도. 대충 버리지. 심생 되고 와도. 심생 되다는데 가르스나 아니 소소글레 학백에 미질라야 딴 따지라고 됐다니. 그제 특수들랑에 침도 준제케 민도. 가르스나 다 등상 되잖아. 레파유가 찍고 지냐르시. 와? 디 구조 땅에 소소리도 미니니 소소도 라관이니 소소도 다 지금 공부 참만 콘 콜라 참만은 신알았도. 다 튕겨진 내가 지금 뭐지 더마도 아니 소소다 돼서 참아지 차게 돼서 또 대충에 크는데 이래 디 튕겨도 왜 탁시캔데 땅나도 야고도 상 튕겨지 고갑티. 뒷자임에는 고갑단 튕기더라서는 이런 데 영향이 있다. 다마 줌랑 돼서 마랑 드라마도 야랑 켜내면 다디. 디셈생도 어떻게 캐치 못도.
And then there's the kind of difficulty, the trouble that we face in having depression and having this kind of mind that's really down. And this is also a trouble that a lot of people face these days. And so having a way to get out of that, to sort of uplift our mind and create, again, that sense of belief in our own abilities is something that is really important to do. And so as a kind of exercise, you can look at people that are above you or somehow have something in terms of their career or whatever it might be that you would like, and think about the fact that we as humans are the same. We have the same kind of brain, we have the same sort of physical capacities, and really there's no difference in the basic sort of materials that make up us or any other human. And it's really just trying to find and bring together the right sort of conducive conditions for being able to grow into that. And so seeing that kind of potential, that possibility, instead of it being closed off, thinking about, well, how do I go about getting the right conditions in order to be able to get where I want to go, and having that sense of possibility and kind of uplifting the mind in its abilities.
Okay.
Thank you. It's very profound. It's wonderful advice. And I wonder, Tibet, the Tibetan Buddhist community, I mean, most people watching this probably know this, and some may not, that the Tibetan community has suffered under Chinese oppression, and many have had to flee into exile. And I just am so impressed with Tibetan Buddhists that you're one of the few religions that really practice nonviolence. You do not believe in war, where there's not many religions in our world that practice this. So how do you maintain, with all of that happening, or the history of that has happened, how do you maintain your faith and also compassion?
Per the Gyami Wangzian Ola Shorsa, Di Nekapsu the Nangja Gitawa Shukchambo Yorwa, Zeme Gitawa di Shukchambo Yoris, and Dinderski Kangad and Dunya Juna Yang the Mak Gabia the Kasha Yagire, in a Magya Yagi Chitang Mak Gabia the Len Lopa Dawgi Samlo Yomarwa, and the country scene that makes it. The Chilu Mangchewa the Dinanshi Samare Samiro.
Pelata and the Duksha Chongra. That in Santa Yamina Casa, that you bring the Tawatende, that Duksha Chongra. And he purgatory Pachi, Gemil Pa, Chicken, Zochi, the Carasasona, Purkorana, and he Chitanda Kuya, take Kuyu Chibumare, so the Purgi. Maybe Rishum Tinan and Nangshuti, Hansa Wora. Dick Gemig, someone and Mabel Swaggy, Cheshi Jua Indu, that Dipa Gatuna Samlege, Kazuka Tutu. Or the Digatola, Taji Kazu Tutu Cheretata. Imbayanata, Top Chichun Tobra Shoro and Ne, Tamatela, Gemi Jura. Gemi Jura Imbayana, Yavarambuchi. Combacia Chimbushi, Yagalto Peace. Dichenegi, Nanjut, Chen La to your mind. That in some Tusu in Bena, Nanjut Temple in Kasakala period. Yanari in Bena, Dig should get a batane, Nanjut Portele, Charchin, Yabushi Chari. Yemen, Nanjut Peta Lion. Dian Benaya, that during which Sinsona, Nanjut di Gemigi, Rishula Pachu and Yangauri. Gemiki Muse, or Ding at the Yori, that and that usually did our chickens along a chase tingo.
Nichitan Puppets or the this.
The consul might die, Chigpa Katia Joyeti, Nanjo the direction the Lagatone, Chigo or
So, okay, in general, I mean, most people probably do know about the kind of fall of Tibet under Chinese rule, and so for the most part, like there's not a thought of like fighting back or engaging in war again because of that commitment to Buddhist ideals. But the one thing that they sort of stood up for, tried to fight for on some level, is not just like protecting the beautiful environment that they had in Tibet, but really the culture, and in particular the strand of Buddhism that has been preserved in Tibet for so long. And so obviously they weren't able to stand up in a kind of military way, but His Holiness, having escaped to India, due to the force of that, I mean, Tibetan Buddhism has spread all over the world, including sort of China taking it up again, actually, because of the influence of His Holiness. There's at least some sort of interest in that more widely within China. But so in terms of, I don't know if we got exactly, I want to try to get more to how they've, there is a commitment to that principle of nonviolence because they see the value in it as a religion, as a message to the world. So they didn't stand up and fight, I mean, in part because of practical terms, but also the only reason to sort of stand up at all was to protect that mostly. Okay.
소소 제샤바야나 다지 균제를 삼다네게 대화 카이나 표준 소바 카이나 상마 되고요래 가 동아 그러니 좀 되고요 말이 디 마테바네 신 도와신 랑레 신바나 디바 지정래 임바임바인데 니 지금 동아 마테바 당 대화 되고 지버래 이제 지금 아니 강아지 태서나 소소라 강아지 태나 강아지 이번에 고소라 강아지 태나 강아지 태그리 선배님지 and they are Tama in the Yori. In Bayanata, Ninji Digi, and Niji Pepen Nanju, the town of Lana, Yabuyungamara Saman, Doyundu, Dig Ninji Gunelani, Nanju, the Sunju Chieti, so what did I read that?
I mean, it's not as though we can say like every Tibetan has it perfectly, but definitely Tibetan Buddhist practitioners who are making an effort have compassion. And really, compassion is based upon this idea that all of us wants to have happiness and doesn't want to suffer. And so when we can really see that and have this kind of idea of compassion, you don't want to cause any harm to others because they're just like you. And so too, you want to benefit them as much as you're able to. And so really, like, that compassion is the guiding force to not be engaging in violence, but it's also the guiding force of wanting to protect Buddhism, because that's sort of like what upholds that teaching of compassion and really the veneration of compassion. So yeah.
Thank you for being here. This concludes part 1 of our sacred conversation. In part 2, we will continue this journey of compassion, healing, and wisdom. With deep gratitude to Geshe Lhundup Jinpa and to translator Katrina Brooks, who helped make his teachings accessible to us all. Bo Gyalo, may peace and freedom always bless Tibet. I'm Dr. Sarah Allen, and this is a little bit of magic.